Question 1. Research into the implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5. For a large utility company, reveals a significant volume of historical asset data accumulated over decades. The project team is considering various strategies for migrating this data into the new Maximo system. One proposed strategy involves a direct, unvalidated bulk import of all historical records to expedite the go-live process. Another option is to migrate only the most recent 5 years of asset data, deeming older records less relevant. A third approach suggests a phased migration, beginning with a pilot group of critical assets, involving extensive data cleansing, validation, and reconciliation before full integration, with subsequent phases migrating less critical assets. Which of the following data migration strategies best aligns with the principles of robust asset management implementation and regulatory compliance within the context of IBM Maximo V7? 5. Option A. A phased migration starting with critical assets, incorporating thorough data cleansing, validation, and reconciliation before full integration, followed by subsequent phases for less critical assets. Option B. A selective migration of only the most frequently used asset types, irrespective of their historical data completeness. Option C. A direct, unvalidated bulk import of all historical records to expedite the go-live process. Option D. Migrating only the most recent 5 years of asset data and discarding older records. Correct answer is A. A phased migration, starting with critical assets, incorporating thorough data cleansing, validation, and reconciliation before full integration, followed by subsequent phases for less critical assets. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to ensure data integrity and compliance with IBM Maximo V7. 5 implementation guidelines, specifically concerning the management of asset data and its associated historical records. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for system efficiency with the long-term implications of data accuracy and auditability, which are paramount in asset management. Careful judgment is required to select a data migration strategy that upholds these principles. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, validated data migration process. This aligns with standard implementation methodologies for enterprise systems like Maximo, emphasizing data cleansing and validation for full integration. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of introducing corrupted or inaccurate data into the live system, thereby ensuring the reliability of asset records for operational, financial, and regulatory reporting. It also facilitates easier troubleshooting and auditing by maintaining a clear lineage of data transformation. An incorrect approach that involves a direct, unvalidated bulk import of all historical data without prior cleansing and reconciliation poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. It risks introducing inaccurate or incomplete asset information into the Maximo system. This can lead to flawed decision-making regarding asset maintenance, procurement, and disposal, potentially violating internal policies and external regulations related to asset lifecycle management and financial reporting accuracy. Furthermore, it undermines the auditability of asset data, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance with any relevant industry standards or legal requirements. Another incorrect approach, which focuses solely on migrating only the most recent asset data and discarding older records, fails to acknowledge the importance of historical context in asset management. This can lead to incomplete asset histories, hindering root cause analysis of failures, impacting warranty claims, and potentially violating regulations that require the retention of historical operational data for a specified period. Ethically, it represents a failure to provide a complete and accurate representation of the organization's assets. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the project's objectives, the capabilities and limitations of the IBM Maximo V7.5 system, and the relevant regulatory landscape. It requires a risk-based assessment of different data migration strategies, prioritizing data quality, system performance, and compliance. Professionals should engage stakeholders to define data cleansing and validation criteria, develop a detailed migration plan with rollback capabilities, and conduct rigorous testing at each stage. Question 2. The control framework reveals that a client using IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 is experiencing delays in their work order closure process. The implementation consultant is tasked with optimizing this process to improve efficiency. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for speed with the imperative to maintain data integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement a new, simplified closure checklist that significantly reduces the number of required fields based on the consultant's experience with other Maximo implementations. Option B. Automate the work order closure process entirely, bypassing manual data entry for all fields to expedite completion. Option C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current work order closure workflow, identifying bottlenecks and areas for simplification. Then propose and pilot changes with key user groups before a full rollout, ensuring all data capture requirements remain intact. Option D. Immediately streamline the work order closure by removing optional data fields that are not strictly mandatory for basic closure, assuming these fields are not critical for regulatory reporting. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current work order closure workflow, identifying bottlenecks and areas for simplification, then propose and pilot changes with key user groups before a full rollout, ensuring all data capture requirements remain intact. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of process changes on data integrity and regulatory compliance within IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5. The implementation consultant must ensure that any process optimization does not inadvertently violate established data governance policies or reporting requirements mandated by the specific regulatory framework governing the client's industry, which is implicitly assumed to be within the scope of the C2010-570 exams context. Careful judgment is required to identify optimizations that enhance workflow without compromising the auditability and accuracy of asset data. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of existing processes and their impact on data before proposing changes. This aligns with the principles of responsible system implementation and data management, ensuring that optimizations are not superficial, but are integrated in a way that maintains or improves the reliability of asset information. By involving stakeholders and conducting pilot testing, the consultant demonstrates due diligence, mitigating risks associated with widespread disruption or noncompliance. This proactive risk management is a cornerstone of professional conduct in IT implementations, particularly within regulated environments. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of steps in a workflow without assessing the downstream impact on data validation or reporting would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the omission of critical data points required for regulatory audits, thereby creating an ethical and legal failure. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing changes without consulting key users or stakeholders, risks creating resistance and overlooking essential operational nuances, potentially leading to data inconsistencies and a failure to meet business objectives, which is a breach of professional responsibility to deliver a functional and accepted solution. A third incorrect approach, which involves making significant process changes without adequate testing, could result in system instability or data corruption, directly contravening the professional obligation to deliver a robust and reliable system. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive assessment of current processes and their alignment with business objectives and regulatory requirements. This should be followed by a risk assessment of any proposed changes, considering potential impacts on data integrity, system performance, and user adoption. Engaging stakeholders throughout the process, from initial assessment to final implementation and testing, is crucial. Finally, a phased rollout with thorough testing and validation at each stage ensures that optimizations are effective and compliant. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical reporting requirement for the client's specific industry cannot be fully met by the standard IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5. Functionality without significant customization. The client's procurement team is eager to finalize the contract, and the implementation partner is keen to secure the business. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the implementation consultant? Option A. Proceed with the implementation as planned, assuming the client will not notice the reporting gap or can adapt their processes to work around it. Option B. Downplay the significance of the reporting limitation to the client, assuring them that standard reporting will be sufficient and that any minor adjustments can be handled post-go-live with minimal effort. Option C. Fully disclose the reporting limitation to the client, explain the potential impact, and propose a detailed plan for the necessary customization, including estimated costs and timelines. Option D. Inform the client that the reporting requirement is not feasible with IBM Maximo v7. 5. And recommend they explore alternative solutions, even if it means losing the current project. The correct answer is C. Fully disclose the reporting limitation to the client, explain the potential impact, and propose a detailed plan for the necessary customization, including estimated costs and timelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in IT implementations, where a consultant might be tempted to overlook or downplay a known issue to secure a project or maintain a positive client relationship. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate pressures of client satisfaction and project acquisition against the long-term integrity of the implementation and the professional responsibility to provide accurate information. The correct approach, which involves transparently disclosing the identified limitation and proposing a mitigation strategy, represents best professional practice because it upholds the principles of honesty, integrity, and competence. In the context of IBM Maximo v7. 5. Implementation. This aligns with general professional ethics that require consultants to act in the best interest of the client by providing accurate assessments of system capabilities and potential risks. While no specific IBM Maximo v7. 5 regulatory framework is provided, professional conduct standards in IT consulting universally emphasize transparency and informed decision-making. Disclosing the limitation allows the client to make an informed decision about proceeding, understanding the potential impact and the proposed solution. An incorrect approach that omits or downplays the limitation is professionally unacceptable because it violates the ethical duty of candor. This misrepresentation can lead to client dissatisfaction, project failure, and reputational damage. It fosters an environment of distrust and can have significant financial and operational consequences for the client if the limitation causes unforeseen problems post-implementation. Such an approach fails to meet the standard of professional competence, which includes the ability to identify and communicate potential issues. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the implementation without addressing the limitation, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively manage risks. It prioritizes expediency over thoroughness and client benefit, potentially leading to a suboptimal or even non-functional solution. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear assessment of the identified issue, its potential impact on the client's business objectives, and the feasibility of mitigation strategies. Consultants should always prioritize transparency and open communication with the client, presenting all relevant information, including limitations and risks, alongside proposed solutions. This allows for collaborative problem-solving and ensures that the client's decisions are based on a complete and accurate understanding of the situation. Question 4. Which approach would be most effective for proactively identifying and prioritizing potential challenges during the initial planning and design phases of an IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5. Implementation. Option A. Implementing a reactive strategy, addressing risks only as they arise during the project lifecycle. Option B. Deferring all risk assessment activities until after the system has been fully deployed and is in production. Option C. Focusing exclusively on quantitative risk assessment, requiring precise historical data for all potential issues. Option D. Conducting a qualitative risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential risks based on their likelihood and impact. Correct answer is D. Conducting a qualitative risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential risks based on their likelihood and impact. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Implementing IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5 involves integrating a complex system into an organization's existing operational and IT infrastructure. A key challenge in such implementations is the proactive identification and mitigation of potential risks that could impact project timelines, budget, system functionality, and ultimately, business operations. Without a structured approach to risk assessment, An organization is vulnerable to unforeseen issues that can derail the project and lead to significant financial and reputational damage. The professional challenge lies in selecting a risk assessment methodology that is comprehensive, adaptable, and aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory compliance requirements. Correct approach analysis. A qualitative risk assessment approach, focusing on identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and prioritizing them based on a defined scoring matrix, represents best professional practice. This approach allows for a thorough understanding of the risk landscape without requiring extensive quantitative data that may not be readily available or reliable during the early stages of an implementation. It aligns with general project management best practices and regulatory expectations for due diligence in system implementations, ensuring that potential disruptions are considered and addressed. For example, regulatory frameworks often mandate a proactive approach to identifying and managing risks that could affect data integrity, system availability, or compliance with industry standards. This qualitative method facilitates the development of appropriate mitigation strategies and contingency plans, demonstrating a commitment to responsible system deployment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring risk assessment entirely is a direct violation of professional responsibility and regulatory expectations for due diligence. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adhere to established project management principles, potentially leading to unmanaged disruptions and noncompliance. Relying solely on quantitative risk assessment without any qualitative input can be premature and impractical in the early phases of a complex system implementation like Maximo. While quantitative analysis is valuable, it often requires historical data and precise metrics that may not be available or accurate at the outset. This approach risks overlooking critical qualitative risks that are harder to quantify, but can have significant impacts. It also fails to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements that often emphasize a comprehensive understanding of potential issues, not just those easily measured. Adopting a reactive approach, where risks are only addressed after they materialize, is fundamentally flawed. This approach is not only unprofessional, but also directly contravenes regulatory mandates that require proactive risk management and the implementation of controls to prevent or minimize adverse events. It leads to crisis management rather than strategic risk mitigation, increasing the likelihood of project failure and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals undertaking an IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 implementation should adopt a structured and iterative risk assessment process. This begins with a qualitative assessment to identify a broad spectrum of potential risks across technical, operational, and business domains. The identified risks should then be analyzed for their likelihood and impact, using a clear and consistent methodology. Prioritization based on this analysis is crucial to focus resources on the most significant threats. This qualitative foundation can then inform the need for more detailed quantitative analysis where appropriate. The decision-making process should always consider the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and the specific context of the Maximo implementation. Regular review and updating of the risk assessment throughout the project lifecycle are essential to adapt to changing circumstances and ensure ongoing effective risk management. Question 5. The review process indicates that during the IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 implementation, a significant number of critical asset data fields have not passed the automated validation checks due to inconsistencies and missing information in the source data provided by the client. The project deadline is rapidly approaching, and the client is eager for go-live. The implementation team is aware of these data validation failures. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the go-live as scheduled, assuming the client will address the data issues post-implementation, and omit any mention of the validation failures in the final project documentation. Option B. Inform the client that the data validation failures are solely the client's responsibility, and that the implementation team cannot proceed until the client resolves all data quality issues, regardless of the project timeline. Option C. Overlook the data validation failures to meet the project deadline, documenting the system as compliant with data integrity standards, and address the issues only if they are raised by the client after go-live. Option D. Immediately inform the client of the data validation issues, present the findings clearly, and propose a phased approach to data remediation, potentially adjusting the go-live date or scope for certain functionalities. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform the client of the data validation issues, present the findings clearly, and propose a phased approach to data remediation, potentially adjusting the go-live date or scope for certain functionalities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in IT implementation projects, specifically concerning data integrity and the potential for misrepresentation. The challenge lies in balancing the pressure to deliver a project on time with the imperative to ensure the accuracy and reliability of critical business data within IBM Maximo. Misrepresenting the state of data validation can lead to significant downstream consequences, including flawed decision-making, operational inefficiencies, and potential regulatory noncompliance if the data is used for reporting or compliance purposes. The professional challenge is to uphold data integrity and transparency without jeopardizing project timelines or client relationships. The correct approach, which involves clearly communicating the identified data validation issues and proposing a phased remediation plan, represents best professional practice. This aligns with principles of professional integrity, transparency, and responsible project management. By openly acknowledging the problem and offering a constructive solution, the implementation team demonstrates accountability and a commitment to delivering a high-quality, reliable Maximo system. This proactive communication allows stakeholders to make informed decisions about resource allocation and project scope, mitigating risks associated with compromised data. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking or downplaying the data validation issues to meet a deadline is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible. This constitutes a failure to uphold professional integrity and can lead to significant business risks. It violates the implicit trust placed in the implementation team to deliver a functional and accurate system. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the implementation without any mention of the data issues, is equally problematic. This is a form of deception and can lead to the client accepting a system with known critical flaws, potentially causing severe operational disruptions and financial losses. It also erodes trust and can damage the reputation of both the individual and the implementing organization. A third incorrect approach, which is to blame the client for the data issues without offering solutions, is unprofessional and counterproductive. While client data quality can be a factor, a professional implementation partner is expected to collaborate with the client to identify and resolve such issues, rather than simply assigning blame. This approach fails to demonstrate a commitment to problem-solving and partnership. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing transparency and problem-solving. The decision-making process should involve 1. Thoroughly assessing the impact of the identified issues. 2. Clearly documenting the findings and their potential consequences. 3. Communicating these findings openly and honestly to all relevant stakeholders, including project sponsors and client representatives. 4. Collaborating with stakeholders to develop a realistic and actionable remediation plan, which may involve scope adjustments, resource allocation, or phased delivery. 5. Ensuring that all decisions and actions are documented and aligned with professional ethical codes and contractual obligations. Question 6. The analysis reveals that a client implementing IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 is struggling with user adoption due to the perceived complexity of data entry for new asset records. The implementation team has proposed two primary strategies. One, focusing on capturing an exhaustive list of asset attributes from day one to ensure complete historical data, and another suggesting a streamlined initial data set with a roadmap for gradual data enrichment based on user feedback and evolving business needs. Which strategy best aligns with professional implementation best practices for IBM Maximo v7.5? Considering user adoption and long-term system effectiveness. Option A. Focus on capturing only the absolute minimum required data fields to expedite initial system deployment, with no defined plan for future data expansion. Option B. Implement a streamlined initial data set with a clear roadmap for gradual data enrichment based on user feedback and evolving business needs. Option C. Prioritize custom development to create simplified data entry screens that abstract away most of the underlying asset attributes, even if it means less granular data. Option D. Mandate the capture of an exhaustive list of asset attributes for all new asset records from the project's inception to ensure complete historical data. The correct answer is B. Implement a streamlined initial data set with a clear roadmap for gradual data enrichment based on user feedback and evolving business needs. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common challenge in IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5 implementations. Balancing the need for comprehensive data capture with the practicalities of user adoption and system performance. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the implementation consultant to understand not only the technical capabilities of Maximo, but also the business processes and user behaviors of the client organization. Overly complex or granular data requirements can lead to user frustration, data entry errors, and ultimately, a failure to achieve the intended benefits of the system. Conversely, insufficient data can hinder effective asset management, reporting, and decision-making. The consultant must navigate these competing demands while adhering to best practices for system configuration and data governance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased and iterative data strategy, aligning with the principles of effective system implementation and change management. By starting with essential data fields and progressively adding more detailed information based on demonstrated value and user feedback, the consultant ensures that the system remains manageable and that users are not overwhelmed. This approach fosters user buy-in and allows for continuous improvement of data quality. It also implicitly supports the principle of fit-for-purpose data, ensuring that the information collected directly supports business objectives and regulatory compliance without unnecessary burden. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on capturing every conceivable data point from the outset is professionally unacceptable. It fails to consider user adoption and can lead to significant data quality issues due to user fatigue and errors. It also ignores the principle of iterative development, which is crucial for complex enterprise system implementations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes minimal data entry to speed up initial deployment, without a clear plan for future data enrichment, is also flawed. This can lead to a system that is initially easy to use but quickly becomes inadequate for advanced analysis, reporting, and proactive asset management, potentially impacting compliance and operational efficiency in the long run. A third incorrect approach that relies on extensive custom development for data capture without a thorough understanding of standard Maximo functionality and best practices can lead to increased complexity, higher maintenance costs, and potential integration issues, deviating from efficient and sustainable system design. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, thoroughly understanding the client's core business objectives and regulatory obligations related to asset management. Second, assessing the current state of their data management practices and user capabilities. Third, designing a data model that is both comprehensive enough to meet objectives and practical for user adoption, often employing a phased implementation. Fourth, actively involving end users in the design and testing process to gather feedback and ensure buy-in. Finally, establishing clear data governance policies and training programs to maintain data quality over time. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to integrating regulatory compliance requirement into the implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5. Considering the potential for significant financial and operational repercussions, which of the following strategies best ensures adherence to applicable regulations throughout the system lifecycle? Option A. Conduct a thorough regulatory impact assessment during the initial design phase, mapping specific legal and industry compliance mandates to Maximo functionalities, and configuring the system to enforce these requirements, including robust audit trails and reporting capabilities. Option B. Assume that the default configurations of IBM Maximo V7.5 inherently satisfy all relevant regulatory obligations and defer detailed compliance reviews until after the system has been deployed and is in production use. Option C. Rely exclusively on the vendor's standard compliance documentation for IBM Maximo V7.5 without performing an independent analysis of how these features align with the organization's specific regulatory environment and operational context. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment and user adoption by implementing the system with minimal upfront compliance configuration, planning to address any identified regulatory gaps through post-implementation patches or workarounds as they arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough regulatory impact assessment during the initial design phase, mapping specific legal and industry compliance mandates to Maximo functionalities, and configuring the system to enforce these requirements, including robust audit trails and reporting capabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing enterprise asset management systems like IBM Maximo, where the need for rapid deployment can sometimes conflict with the imperative for thorough regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing project timelines and budget constraints against the critical requirement to adhere to established regulatory frameworks. A failure to do so can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated strategy for regulatory compliance. By embedding compliance considerations into the core design and configuration of IBM Maximo from the outset, an organization ensures that the system inherently supports adherence to relevant regulations. This involves detailed analysis of applicable laws and guidelines, mapping these requirements to Maximo functionalities, and configuring the system to enforce compliance controls. This approach represents best professional practice because it minimizes the risk of non-compliance, reduces the cost of remediation, and builds a foundation for sustainable operational integrity. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design, which is a cornerstone of responsible IT implementation and governance. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance, such as deferring regulatory checks to a later stage or assuming out-of-the-box Maximo features are sufficient without verification, poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. Specifically, failing to conduct a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment before or during the configuration phase is a direct violation of due diligence principles. Relying solely on vendor documentation without validating against specific organizational regulatory obligations is also a failure of professional responsibility. Furthermore, implementing the system without clear audit trails for compliance-related activities or without mechanisms to report on compliance status would be a critical oversight, potentially leading to an inability to demonstrate adherence during an audit. These failures can result in penalties under relevant legislation and erode stakeholder trust. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying all applicable regulatory requirements relevant to asset management and the specific industry. Next, these requirements must be translated into actionable configuration and process steps within IBM Maximo. A gap analysis should then be performed to identify any discrepancies between regulatory needs and proposed system functionality. Finally, a robust testing and validation plan, including user acceptance testing with a focus on compliance scenarios, should be executed before go-live. Continuous monitoring and periodic reviews of compliance configurations are also essential for maintaining adherence over time. Question 8. Compliance review shows that the current work order closure process in IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 is experiencing significant delays and a high rate of incomplete data, potentially impacting regulatory reporting accuracy. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings to optimize the process? Option A. Advise the operations team to simply work harder and faster to close out work orders, as the system is functioning as designed. Option B. Conduct a thorough re-engineering of the work order lifecycle within Maximo v7.5, focusing on workflow automation, standardized task completion, and enhanced data validation rules at key stages. Option C. Develop a series of custom fields to capture the missing data points, instructing users to manually input this information during work order closure. Option D. Implement additional user training sessions on the existing work order closure procedures without altering the current process flow. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough re-engineering of the work order lifecycle within Maximo v7.5, focusing on workflow automation, standardized task completion, and enhanced data validation rules at key stages. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise asset management implementations where the initial process design, while functional, has not kept pace with evolving operational needs and regulatory expectations. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for system functionality with the long-term benefits of process optimization, especially when faced with resistance to change and the perceived cost of re-engineering. The professional challenge is to identify and implement improvements that enhance efficiency, compliance, and data integrity within the IBM Maximo V7. 5. Framework. Without disrupting critical operations or incurring excessive expenditure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review and re-engineering of the existing work order process within IBM Maximo V7. 5. Focusing on identifying bottlenecks, redundancies, and areas for automation. This aligns with best practices for process optimization, aiming to improve efficiency, reduce manual intervention, and ensure data accuracy. By leveraging Maximo's capabilities for workflow automation, standardized task lists, and improved reporting, the organization can achieve a more streamlined and compliant maintenance operation. This proactive stance on process improvement is crucial for maintaining operational excellence and meeting potential future regulatory scrutiny, as it demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and robust asset management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a simple workaround by adding custom fields without re-evaluating the underlying process is professionally unacceptable. This approach creates technical debt, increases system complexity, and fails to address the root causes of inefficiency or potential compliance gaps. It leads to a fragmented user experience and makes future system upgrades or integrations more difficult. Ignoring the compliance review findings and continuing with the status quo is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for internal controls and potential regulatory requirements, exposing the organization to risks of non-compliance, operational inefficiencies, and potential penalties. It signals a lack of commitment to best practices in asset management. Focusing solely on user training for the existing inefficient process without addressing the process itself is a superficial solution. While training is important, it cannot compensate for fundamentally flawed or outdated processes. This approach fails to achieve true optimization and will likely lead to continued frustration and suboptimal outcomes, making it professionally inadequate. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the scope and implications of the compliance review. This involves engaging with stakeholders across operations, IT, and compliance departments to gather requirements and identify pain points. A phased approach to process reengineering, starting with the most critical or problematic areas, is advisable. This should involve mapping current processes, identifying areas for improvement using Maximo's built-in functionalities, and then designing and implementing optimized workflows. Rigorous testing and user acceptance are critical before full deployment. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops should be established to ensure ongoing effectiveness and to identify further opportunities for optimization. Question 9. During the evaluation of the IBM Maximo Asset Management V7, 5 implementation, the project team is migrating asset criticality assessment data from a legacy system. The criticality is determined by a combination of factors including failure consequence, likelihood of failure, and detectability, which are weighted and scored according to internal business policies. What is the most professional and effective approach to ensure the accuracy and integrity of the migrated asset criticality data within the new Maximo system? Option A. Rely solely on the data migration scripts to transfer the data, assuming the scripts have been thoroughly tested and will accurately reflect the source system's data structure. Option B. Postpone the detailed validation of asset criticality data until after the entire Maximo system has been deployed and is in production, to avoid delaying the go-live date. Option C. Implement a phased validation strategy that includes automated data integrity checks, followed by manual reconciliation of critical assets by subject matter experts against defined business rules and source data. Option D. Conduct a quick, high-level manual review of a small, randomly selected subset of the migrated asset criticality records to confirm general accuracy. Correct answer is C. Implement a phased validation strategy that includes automated data integrity checks, followed by manual reconciliation of critical assets by subject matter experts against defined business rules and source data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical business process, asset criticality assessment, is being migrated to IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5. The challenge lies in ensuring the accuracy and completeness of the data migration, which directly impacts the reliability of maintenance strategies and resource allocation. A failure to accurately capture and translate criticality factors can lead to misprioritization of maintenance activities, increased operational risk, and potential noncompliance with internal policies or industry best practices for asset management. The professional challenge is to balance the need for a timely migration with the imperative of data integrity and process fidelity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased validation process that includes both automated checks and manual reconciliation. This method represents best professional practice because it systematically verifies the migrated criticality data against the source system and business rules. Automated checks can identify discrepancies in data types, missing values, or rule violations, while manual reconciliation by subject matter experts, SME, ensures that the nuanced business logic and qualitative aspects of criticality are correctly translated. This layered validation minimizes the risk of errors and ensures that the Maximo system accurately reflects the organization's asset criticality framework, thereby supporting effective maintenance planning and risk management. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on automated data migration scripts without any post-migration validation. This is professionally unacceptable because automated scripts, while efficient, cannot account for all business logic nuances or potential data corruption during transfer. It risks propagating errors, leading to inaccurate criticality assessments and flawed maintenance strategies, potentially violating internal governance policies for data accuracy and system integrity. Another incorrect approach is to perform a superficial manual review of a small sample of migrated data. This is professionally unsound, as it provides a false sense of security. A small sample is unlikely to uncover systemic issues or errors affecting the majority of assets. This approach fails to meet the professional obligation to ensure comprehensive data quality and could lead to significant operational disruptions and financial losses due to mismanaged assets, potentially breaching fiduciary duties related to asset stewardship. A third incorrect approach is to defer the criticality assessment validation to the end of the project, after all other modules are implemented. This is professionally negligent. Criticality assessment is a foundational element that influences many other Maximo configurations, such as preventive maintenance schedules, spare parts planning, and inspection strategies. Delaying its validation means that subsequent configurations may be based on flawed data, requiring extensive rework and potentially jeopardizing the entire project timeline and budget, and failing to adhere to project management best practices for risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to data migration validation. This involves identifying critical data elements, like asset criticality, and implementing robust, multi-stage validation processes. The decision-making framework should prioritize data integrity and business process alignment. This includes defining clear validation criteria involving relevant stakeholders, business users, IT, and SMEs in the validation process, and establishing a clear process for issue resolution and revalidation. The goal is to achieve a high degree of confidence in the migrated data before proceeding with system go-live, ensuring the Maximo implementation effectively supports business objectives and regulatory compliance. Question 10. Process analysis reveals that the current work order management process in a manufacturing facility is experiencing significant delays and inefficiencies, impacting production uptime. The IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 implementation team is tasked with redesigning this process. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the redesigned work order process effectively addresses the needs of all relevant business units and contributes to overall operational improvement? Option A. Directly migrate the existing paper-based work order forms and procedures into Maximo V7.5 without any modifications to leverage existing familiarity. Option B. Conduct in-depth interviews and workshops with representatives from maintenance, operations, planning, and finance to understand their current pain points, desired outcomes, and interdependencies within the work order lifecycle, and use this consolidated feedback to design the Maximo V7.5 solution. Option C. Prioritize the technical specifications and preferred user interface elements favored by the IT department responsible for Maximo administration. Option D. Focus exclusively on streamlining the process for the maintenance department, as they are the primary users of the work order system. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the technical specifications and preferred user interface elements favored by the IT department responsible for Maximo administration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IBM Maximo V7. 5 implementations where a critical business process, such as work order management, is being redesigned. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate system functionality with the long-term strategic goals and the diverse needs of various stakeholder groups. Without a clear understanding of how different departments perceive and interact with the work order process, any proposed changes risk being inefficient, causing user dissatisfaction, or failing to deliver the expected business benefits. The professional challenge is to navigate these differing perspectives and ensure the implemented solution aligns with both operational requirements and overarching business objectives, all within the constraints of the project scope and timeline. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured and inclusive stakeholder engagement process. This begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders, including end users, technicians, supervisors, IT support, finance, and management. For each identified stakeholder group, a detailed analysis of their current involvement in the work order process, their pain points, and their desired outcomes is crucial. This analysis should then inform the design of new or modified workflows within Maximo V7. 5. Actively involving stakeholders in requirements gathering, solution design workshops, and user acceptance testing. The implementation team can ensure that the final solution is practical, user-friendly, and addresses the core business needs. This collaborative approach fosters buy-in, reduces resistance to change, and ultimately leads to a more successful and sustainable Maximo implementation. This aligns with best practices in change management and system implementation, emphasizing user-centric design and comprehensive impact assessment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize the technical feasibility and the preferences of the IT implementation team over the operational needs of the end users. This can lead to a system that is technically sound but difficult to use, inefficient in practice, and ultimately rejected by the people who are meant to benefit from it. This approach fails to consider the human element of system implementation and can result in significant rework, user frustration, and a failure to achieve the desired business outcomes. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the requirements of a single, dominant department without considering the impact on other areas of the business. For example, optimizing the work order process purely for the finance department's reporting needs might create significant inefficiencies for the maintenance technicians in the field. This siloed approach ignores the interconnectedness of business processes and can lead to unintended negative consequences for other stakeholders, undermining the overall success of the Maximo implementation. A third incorrect approach is to assume that existing processes can be directly replicated in Maximo V7. 5. Without any reevaluation or optimization. While some direct mapping might be possible, this often misses opportunities to leverage Maximo's capabilities for process improvement. This can result in a system that is merely a digital version of an inefficient manual process, failing to deliver the expected value and potentially introducing new complexities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to stakeholder management and process analysis. This involves 1. Stakeholder identification and analysis. Clearly define all stakeholder groups and understand their roles, interests, and influence related to the work order process. 2. Requirements gathering. Employ a variety of techniques, interviews, workshops, surveys, to elicit comprehensive and accurate requirements from all stakeholder groups. 3. Process mapping and re-engineering. Document current state processes and identify opportunities for improvement. Leveraging Maximo V7. 5 capabilities. 4. Solution design and prototyping. Develop solutions that address identified needs and validate them with stakeholders through prototypes or mock-ups. 5. User acceptance testing, UAT. Ensure that end users rigorously test the system to confirm it meets their operational requirements. 6. Change management and training. Develop and execute a comprehensive plan for communicating changes and training users. This structured decision-making process ensures that all critical aspects of the implementation are considered, leading to a solution that is aligned with business objectives and accepted by its users. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that during the IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 implementation, the project team is considering different strategies for data entry and validation. Which strategy best supports the regulatory compliance requirements for data integrity and auditability within the system? Option A. Prioritizing rapid data entry by minimizing validation checks to expedite user adoption, with a plan to address data accuracy issues in a later phase. Option B. Implementing strict data validation rules at the point of entry for all critical asset data, coupled with a comprehensive audit trail that logs all changes, including user, date, and nature of modification. Option C. Configuring the system with basic data fields and relying on end users to manually ensure data accuracy and completeness without automated checks. Option D. Focusing on the technical configuration of asset modules and deferring the detailed definition of data ownership and validation processes until after the system goes live. The correct answer is B. Implementing strict data validation rules at the point of entry for all critical asset data, coupled with a comprehensive audit trail that logs all changes, including user, date, and nature of modification. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing enterprise asset management systems like IBM Maximo, where the need to meet immediate business requirements can sometimes conflict with long-term regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the pressure for rapid deployment and user adoption with the imperative to establish robust data governance and audit trails, which are critical for regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the system, from its inception, is configured to support compliance objectives without becoming an insurmountable barrier to operational efficiency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates regulatory compliance into the system's design and implementation phases. By establishing clear data ownership, defining validation rules aligned with relevant regulations, e.g., data integrity, reporting standards, and ensuring that audit trails are comprehensive and accessible, the implementation team builds a foundation for ongoing compliance. This aligns with the principles of good data governance and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing asset-intensive industries. It ensures that the Maximo system not only manages assets, but also provides the necessary evidence of compliance. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate user adoption over data validation and auditability fails to recognize the downstream consequences of non-compliance. This could lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions if the data within Maximo is found to be inaccurate, incomplete, or untrustworthy during an audit. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical configuration without considering the business processes that generate and consume data, creates a system that may be technically sound but operationally incapable of supporting compliance. This overlooks the human element and the importance of training and process adherence in maintaining data integrity. A third incorrect approach, neglecting the establishment of clear data ownership and stewardship, results in ambiguity regarding responsibility for data accuracy and compliance, making it difficult to address issues and assign accountability when they arise. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape relevant to the client's industry and jurisdiction. This understanding should then inform the design and configuration of the Maximo system, prioritizing features and processes that directly support compliance. A risk-based approach, identifying potential compliance gaps and implementing mitigation strategies within the system, is crucial. Regular stakeholder engagement, including compliance officers and legal counsel, ensures that the implementation remains aligned with regulatory expectations. Finally, a commitment to ongoing monitoring and auditing of the system's compliance-related functionalities is essential for sustained adherence. Question 12. Regulatory review indicates that the implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 for critical infrastructure client requires strict adherence to data privacy regulations concerning sensitive asset information. During the data migration phase, the project team encounters a significant volume of asset records containing personally identifiable information, PI, and commercially sensitive details. The project manager is seeking the most compliant and secure method to handle this data within Maximo, ensuring that access is restricted to authorized personnel and that data integrity is maintained throughout the process. Option A. Proceed with migrating all asset data, including sensitive details, without any specific access restrictions or masking, assuming that only authorized users will access these records. Option B. Rely on manual, out-of-band processes managed by a separate team to control access to sensitive asset information within Maximo after the initial data load. Option C. Disable certain data validation rules and security controls in Maximo temporarily to expedite the migration of all asset data, planning to re-enable them after go live. Option D. Configure Maximo security groups and profiles to restrict access to sensitive asset data fields and records based on user roles, and implement data masking for non-production environments. The correct answer is D. Configure Maximo security groups and profiles to restrict access to sensitive asset data fields and records based on user roles, and implement data masking for non-production environments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise system implementations, where the pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise long-term regulatory compliance. The core challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for system go-live with the imperative to adhere to data privacy regulations, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive asset information. The implementation team is faced with a decision that has direct implications for data security, auditability, and potential legal ramifications if not handled correctly. The professional challenge is to identify and implement a solution that is both technically feasible within the project timeline and demonstrably compliant with the relevant regulatory framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Maximo's built-in security and data masking capabilities to control access to sensitive asset data. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and data minimization, fundamental tenets of many data privacy regulations. By configuring security groups and profiles to restrict access to specific fields or records based on user roles, the system ensures that only authorized personnel can view or modify sensitive information. Furthermore, employing data masking techniques for non-production environments or for specific reporting needs prevents the accidental exposure of sensitive data. This proactive, configuration-driven approach is best professional practice because it embeds compliance directly into the system's design and operation, rather than relying on ad hoc measures. It ensures ongoing adherence to regulatory requirements, facilitates easier audits, and minimizes the risk of data breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves disabling data validation rules or security controls to expedite data migration. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly violates data integrity principles and opens the door to unauthorized access and modification of sensitive asset data, which could have severe legal and financial consequences. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on external, manual processes to manage access to sensitive data after migration. This is inefficient, prone to human error, and creates an audit trail that is difficult to maintain and verify, thus failing to meet regulatory requirements for demonstrable control and accountability. Finally, ignoring the need for data anonymization or pseudonymization in non-production environments is a critical failure. This exposes sensitive asset information to a wider audience than necessary, increasing the risk of data misuse and contravening data privacy principles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, e.g., data privacy laws relevant to asset management. This understanding should guide the design and configuration of the Maximo system from the outset. The decision-making process should involve a risk assessment, identifying potential compliance gaps and their consequences. The preferred solution will be one that integrates compliance into the system's architecture through configuration and robust security features, rather than relying on manual workarounds or post-implementation fixes. Collaboration with legal and compliance departments is crucial to ensure that the chosen approach meets all regulatory obligations. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5, a critical system for operational maintenance and asset tracking, is approaching its end-of-support date. The business is heavily reliant on its current functionalities, including several customizations. What is the most professionally responsible and strategically sound approach to address this impending end-of-support? Option A. Undertake a complete Big Bang migration of all Maximo functionalities and data to a new platform over a single weekend to minimize the duration of parallel operations. Option B. Continue using the unsupported Maximo v7.5 system while deferring any migration plans until a critical failure occurs to avoid immediate disruption. Option C. Immediately initiate a phased migration to a modern, supported asset management solution, prioritizing the transfer of critical functionalities and data with thorough testing at each stage. Option D. Focus on migrating only the most basic and essential asset tracking features to a new system, indefinitely postponing the migration of complex integrations and customizations. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a phased migration to a modern, supported asset management solution, prioritizing the transfer of critical functionalities and data with thorough testing at each stage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT asset management where a critical system, IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5, is nearing its end of support date. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate operational needs of the business, which rely on Maximo, with the long-term strategic imperative of migrating to a supported platform. The risk of continuing with an unsupported system includes security vulnerabilities, lack of vendor support for critical issues, and potential non-compliance with internal IT governance policies, and potentially external regulatory requirements if data integrity or availability is compromised. The pressure to maintain business continuity can lead to short-sighted decisions that create greater long-term technical debt and risk. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased migration strategy that prioritizes critical functionalities and data. This aligns with best practices for enterprise system upgrades, emphasizing risk mitigation and minimizing disruption. A phased approach allows for thorough testing of each module or functionality as it's migrated, ensuring data integrity and user adoption. It also provides opportunities to reevaluate business processes and leverage new capabilities of the target platform, rather than simply replicating old ones. This strategy is professionally sound as it demonstrates proactive risk management, adherence to IT lifecycle management principles, and a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant IT environment. It also allows for better resource allocation and change management, reducing the likelihood of project failure. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing with the unsupported Maximo v7.5 without a clear migration plan is a failure of proactive risk management and IT governance. It exposes the organization to significant security risks due to unpatched vulnerabilities and a lack of vendor support for critical incidents. This approach could also lead to non-compliance with internal IT policies that mandate the use of supported software and potentially external regulations if the system's failure impacts regulated data or processes. Implementing a Big Bang migration where all functionalities are moved at once without adequate testing or phased rollout is a high-risk strategy. This approach significantly increases the chance of widespread system failure, data corruption, and severe business disruption. It demonstrates poor change management and a lack of understanding of the complexities involved in migrating a critical enterprise asset management system. This can lead to significant financial losses and reputational damage. Focusing solely on migrating the most basic functionalities and deferring complex integrations or customizations indefinitely is also a suboptimal approach. While it might seem like a way to reduce immediate risk, it creates a system that is only partially functional, leading to workarounds, inefficiencies, and a failure to realize the full benefits of a new platform. This approach fails to address the underlying business needs that Maximo v7.5 was designed to support and can lead to ongoing operational challenges and a need for future, more complex rework. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first conducting a comprehensive assessment of the current Maximo v7.5 environment, including all customizations, integrations, and critical business processes it supports. This assessment should be followed by a thorough evaluation of potential replacement platforms, considering both functional fit and vendor support. The decision-making process should then involve developing a detailed, phased migration plan that prioritizes based on business criticality and technical complexity. This plan should include robust testing, user training, and a clear rollback strategy. Stakeholder engagement throughout the process is crucial to manage expectations and ensure buy-in. Adherence to established ITIL or similar frameworks for change management and incident management will guide the execution of the migration. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates that the recent implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 has been technically completed. However, there is no documented evidence of a formal assessment to determine how this new system impacts the organization's adherence to its existing regulatory framework, particularly concerning asset lifecycle management and maintenance reporting. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate next step to ensure ongoing compliance? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate how the IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 implementation affects the organization's ability to meet its regulatory obligations, identifying any gaps and developing remediation plans. Option B. Schedule a follow-up meeting with the IT department to request a report on the system's performance metrics without specifically addressing regulatory adherence. Option C. Postpone any further assessment of regulatory impact until a specific compliance issue is identified through internal audits or external regulatory inquiries. Option D. Rely on the technical implementation team's confirmation that the system is functioning as designed, assuming this inherently covers all regulatory requirements. Correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate how the IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 implementation affects the organization's ability to meet its regulatory obligations, identifying any gaps and developing remediation plans. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT asset management or a significant change. The implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 has been completed, but its impact on existing operational processes and regulatory compliance has not been thoroughly assessed. The professional challenge lies in bridging the gap between technical implementation and business/regulatory outcomes. It requires a proactive approach to ensure that the new system not only functions technically, but also supports and enhances the organization's ability to meet its obligations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that specifically examines how the Maximo v7.5 implementation affects the organization's adherence to its established regulatory framework. This is best professional practice because it directly addresses the core purpose of IT governance, ensuring that technology investments deliver intended business value and mitigate risks, including regulatory noncompliance. By systematically evaluating the system's influence on regulatory requirements, the organization can identify and rectify any deviations, thereby safeguarding its operational integrity and avoiding potential penalties. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT deployment and risk management. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a successful technical implementation automatically equates to regulatory compliance. This assumption is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the organization's legal and ethical obligations. Relying solely on the technical team's confirmation of functionality without verifying its impact on regulatory adherence is a critical oversight. Furthermore, delaying the assessment until an issue arises is reactive and exposes the organization to unnecessary risk, which is contrary to proactive risk management principles. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multidisciplinary approach. First, clearly define the scope of the impact assessment, focusing on key business processes and regulatory obligations. Second, engage relevant stakeholders from IT, operations, legal, and compliance departments to gather comprehensive input. Third, utilize established impact assessment methodologies that consider both direct and indirect consequences of the system change. Fourth, prioritize findings based on risk and regulatory criticality and develop actionable remediation plans. Finally, establish a feedback loop to ensure continuous monitoring and adaptation as the system is used and evolves. Question 15. Implementation of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7.5 requires a robust testing strategy. Considering the project timeline is aggressive, which of the following testing approaches best upholds professional implementation standards and minimizes post-go-live risks? Option A. Defer all performance testing until after the system has been deployed and is in production use. Option B. Conduct comprehensive unit integration, user acceptance, and performance testing with clear exit criteria for each phase before go-live. Option C. Focus testing efforts exclusively on the most frequently used functionalities, ignoring less common scenarios and exception handling. Option D. Rely primarily on developer-led unit testing and skip formal user acceptance testing to expedite the deployment. Correct answer is B. Conduct comprehensive unit, integration, user acceptance, and performance testing with clear exit criteria for each phase before go live. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IBM Maximo V7. 5 implementations, balancing the desire for rapid deployment with the necessity of thorough, compliant testing. The project team is under pressure to go live quickly, which can lead to shortcuts in the testing phase. This pressure creates a professional challenge, requiring careful judgment to ensure that the implemented system meets not only functional requirements, but also adheres to any implicit or explicit regulatory expectations regarding data integrity and system reliability, even if specific regulations aren't explicitly stated in the exam context. Risk lies in deploying a system that, while seemingly functional, may contain undetected defects that could lead to operational failures or data inaccuracies, impacting business processes and potentially leading to noncompliance with internal controls or industry best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased testing strategy that includes unit testing, integration testing, user acceptance testing, UAT, and performance testing. This methodology ensures that individual components function correctly, that they interact as expected, and that the system meets user needs and performance benchmarks before go live. This comprehensive approach is best professional practice because it systematically identifies and rectifies defects at various stages, minimizing the risk of critical issues post-deployment. It aligns with general principles of quality assurance and risk management inherent in any enterprise system implementation, ensuring a robust and reliable solution. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves skipping formal UAT and relying solely on developer testing. This is professionally unacceptable, as it bypasses the crucial validation by end users who understand the business processes and can identify functional gaps or usability issues that developers might overlook. Represents a failure to ensure the system meets business requirements and can lead to user dissatisfaction and operational inefficiencies. Another incorrect approach is to defer performance testing until after go live. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it risks system instability and unacceptability under real-world load. If the system performs poorly after deployment, it can disrupt critical business operations, lead to data loss or corruption, and potentially violate service-level agreements or internal operational standards. A third incorrect approach is to limit testing to only the core functionalities, neglecting edge cases and exception handling. This is professionally unsound as it creates a system vulnerable to unexpected inputs or scenarios, leading to unpredictable behavior and potential data integrity issues. It fails to demonstrate due diligence in ensuring the system's robustness and reliability across a wide range of operational conditions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to testing, prioritizing test cases based on their criticality to business operations and regulatory compliance. A structured testing plan, developed collaboratively with business stakeholders, is essential. This plan should clearly define test objectives, scope, methodologies, entry and exit criteria for each testing phase, and roles and responsibilities. Regular communication and reporting on testing progress and defect resolution are vital to maintaining transparency and managing stakeholder expectations. When faced with pressure to accelerate deployment, professionals must advocate for adequate testing, clearly articulating the risks associated with shortcuts and proposing alternative strategies for risk mitigation if full testing cannot be accommodated. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that the current configuration of the IBM Maximo Asset Management V7.5 system, while operational, exhibits inconsistencies in asset categorization and maintenance history logging, potentially impacting regulatory compliance reporting and operational efficiency. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings while adhering to professional best practices for system implementation and data integrity? Option A. Focus on updating the user interface to guide users towards more consistent data entry without altering the underlying data structure or validation rules. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current asset data and maintenance logs against established asset management standards and IBM Maximo V7. 5 best practices, followed by a pilot program to test revised data entry protocols and asset categorization rules before a phased rollout of the improved processes. Option C. Undertake a complete re-implementation of the IBM Maximo V7. 5 system with a new, standardized configuration, bypassing any pilot testing to expedite the resolution of data issues. Option D. Immediately implement a system-wide data cleansing initiative to correct all identified inconsistencies, assuming that process improvements will be addressed in a subsequent, separate project. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current asset data and maintenance logs against established asset management standards and IBM Maximo V7. 5 best practices, followed by a pilot program to test revised data entry protocols and asset categorization rules before a phased rollout of the improved processes. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IBM Maximo V7. 5 implementations where the initial configuration, while functional, may not align with evolving industry best practices for asset management and data integrity. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for system operation with the long-term benefits of adopting more robust and compliant processes. A critical judgment is required to determine the most effective and least disruptive path to improvement, considering resource constraints, user impact, and the potential for data corruption or misinterpretation. The correct approach involves a phased, data-driven methodology. This begins with a thorough audit of existing workflows and data quality against recognized asset management standards and the specific requirements of the IBM Maximo V7. 5 framework. Subsequently, a pilot implementation of revised processes and data standards within a controlled environment allows for validation and refinement before a full-scale rollout. This iterative process minimizes risk, ensures user buy-in, and aligns with the principle of continuous improvement inherent in effective asset management, thereby upholding the integrity and reliability of the asset data managed within Maximo. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate data correction without addressing underlying process deficiencies would fail to prevent future data quality issues. This neglects the root causes and leads to a reactive, rather than proactive management strategy, potentially violating principles of data governance and operational efficiency. Another incorrect approach, which involves a complete system overhaul without a pilot or phased rollout, introduces significant risk of disruption, data loss, and user resistance. This disregards the importance of change management and could lead to non-compliance with operational continuity requirements. A third incorrect approach, prioritizing speed over thoroughness by implementing changes without adequate testing or validation, risks introducing new errors and undermining user trust in the system, which is a failure in professional diligence and could lead to operational failures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, stakeholder consultation, and a phased implementation strategy. This involves understanding the business impact of proposed changes, evaluating the technical feasibility, and ensuring alignment with regulatory and industry best practices for asset management. A structured approach, starting with assessment, followed by planning, piloting, and then controlled deployment, is crucial for successful and compliant system enhancements. Question 17. System analysis indicates a client implementing IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5. In a regulated industry, requires a deviation from standard asset hierarchy configuration to expedite the onboarding of a large number of new assets, proposing a simplified non-standard structure. What is the most professionally sound approach to address this request? Option A. Reject the client's request for a simplified hierarchy, insisting on the standard configuration to maintain system integrity and avoid potential future compliance issues. Option B. Advise the client to manage the new assets using an external spreadsheet and link to it from Maximo, as this will allow for rapid onboarding without altering the core asset hierarchy. Option C. Immediately implement the simplified asset hierarchy as requested by the client to meet their urgent onboarding deadline, deferring any formal review until after the initial deployment. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed simplified hierarchy on reporting, auditing, and future system scalability. And if deemed acceptable after risk mitigation, proceed with a formally approved change request. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed simplified hierarchy on reporting, auditing, and future system scalability, and if deemed acceptable after risk mitigation, proceed with a formally approved change request. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IBM Maximo v7. 5 implementations where a client requests a deviation from standard configuration to accommodate a perceived immediate business need. The professional challenge lies in balancing the client's desire for rapid deployment with the adherence to established best practices and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data integrity and auditability within a regulated industry. The risk of compromising system integrity or audit trails for short-term gains is significant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment and a formal change control process. This aligns with general principles of good system implementation, and in regulated environments, often mirrors requirements for documented justification, risk assessment, and approval for any system modifications that could affect data accuracy, security, or auditability. In the context of IBM Maximo v7. 5. This means leveraging the system's built-in configuration capabilities and change management workflows to ensure that any deviation is understood, approved, and documented, thereby maintaining the system's integrity and compliance with potential future audits. This approach prioritizes long-term system stability and regulatory adherence over immediate, potentially risky, expediency. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately implement the requested customization without a formal review. This failure is a direct violation of change management best practices and can lead to undocumented system behavior, making troubleshooting and auditing extremely difficult. Ethically, it bypasses due diligence and exposes the project to significant risk. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without understanding the underlying business driver. While adherence to standards is crucial, a complete lack of engagement can damage client relationships and may overlook a legitimate, albeit poorly articulated, business requirement that could be met through a compliant configuration change. This demonstrates poor professional judgment and a lack of client-centric problem-solving. A third incorrect approach is to implement a workaround that is not integrated into the Maximo system's core functionality, such as using external spreadsheets for critical data. This creates data silos, increases the risk of data inconsistency, and severely compromises the audit trail, which is a critical failure in any regulated environment. It also undermines the value proposition of a comprehensive asset management system like Maximo. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the client's request and its business rationale. This should be followed by an assessment of the request against established system configuration guidelines, best practices, and any relevant regulatory requirements. If the request deviates, a formal impact analysis should be conducted, detailing potential risks, benefits, and alternative compliance solutions. A change control process, involving appropriate stakeholders for review and approval, is essential before any modification is implemented. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, documented, and aligned with both business objectives and professional responsibilities. Question 18. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a proposed customization to the work order tracking application in IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5 may affect multiple downstream modules. Which of the following approaches to assessing the impact of this customization is most aligned with best professional practice for ensuring system stability and business continuity? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of the proposed customization's code and configuration settings, cross-referencing them with the documentation for the affected modules to identify direct dependencies and potential conflicts. Option B. Immediately proceed with the customization deployment and address any issues that arise as part of a reactive incident management process. Option C. Perform a high-level review of the customization's intended functionality and assume that any significant impacts will be identified by end users during post-implementation testing. Option D. Rely on the lead developer's prior experience with similar customizations to estimate the potential impact on other modules, assuming no significant issues will arise. Correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of the proposed customizations code and configuration settings, cross-referencing them with the documentation for the affected modules to identify direct dependencies and potential conflicts. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IBM Maximo implementations, balancing the need for comprehensive impact assessment with the practical constraints of project timelines and resources. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and efficient method to evaluate the ramifications of a proposed change, ensuring that critical business processes are not inadvertently disrupted. This requires a nuanced understanding of the Maximo system's interconnected modules and the potential ripple effects of modifications. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, data-driven evaluation that directly addresses the potential consequences of the proposed change within the specific context of the IBM Maximo V7. 5. Environment. It involves a systematic review of affected modules, configurations, and integrations, aligning with the principles of thorough impact analysis mandated by sound IT governance and project management methodologies. This proactive assessment minimizes the risk of unforeseen issues, reduces the likelihood of costly rework, and ensures that the implemented change aligns with business objectives and regulatory compliance, if applicable within the exam's jurisdiction. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate technical impact, without considering the broader business process implications, is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of holistic understanding, potentially leading to the disruption of critical operational workflows and a negative impact on user productivity. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the experience of a single individual, without formal documentation or validation, introduces significant risk. This is professionally unsound as it bypasses established procedures for change management and impact assessment, making it difficult to trace decisions, justify actions, or learn from past experiences. A third incorrect approach that delays the impact assessment until after the change has been implemented is a critical failure. This is not only professionally negligent, but also ethically questionable, as it prioritizes speed over due diligence, potentially exposing the organization to significant operational and financial risks without adequate mitigation strategies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the proposed change. This should be followed by identifying all potentially affected areas within the Maximo system, including configurations, workflows, integrations, and data structures. A systematic review of these areas, involving relevant stakeholders and subject matter experts, is crucial. The assessment should then quantify the potential impact in terms of operational disruption, resource requirements, and business risk. Finally, mitigation strategies should be developed and documented before proceeding with the change. Question 19. Investigation of process optimization within IBM Maximo Asset Management V7. 5. Implementation. A project team has identified several potential workflow improvements. Which approach best ensures that these optimizations are effective, adopted by users, and contribute to sustainable operational efficiency without introducing new risks? Option A. Implement a pilot program with a select group of end users to test the proposed optimized workflows, gather feedback, and iteratively refine the processes before a full-scale rollout. Option B. Redefine all core asset management processes from a theoretical efficiency standpoint and mandate the new workflows to all users, prioritizing theoretical gains over immediate user input. Option C. Immediately deploy the new, optimized workflows across all relevant departments, assuming that the documented efficiency gains will be readily accepted and integrated into daily operations. Option D. Focus on automating all existing manual steps in the current workflows, believing that increased automation inherently leads to process optimization, regardless of the original process's effectiveness. The correct answer is A. Implement a pilot program with a select group of end users to test the proposed optimized workflows, gather feedback, and iteratively refine the processes before a full-scale rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing enterprise asset management solutions like IBM Maximo, specifically concerning process optimization. The professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for immediate efficiency gains with the need for sustainable, compliant, and user-adopted processes. A hasty implementation of optimized workflows without proper validation can lead to unintended consequences, including data integrity issues, user resistance, and non-compliance with internal policies or industry best practices, which, while not explicitly detailed in the C 2010-570 exam syllabus as external regulations, represent the core principles of good governance and operational integrity expected in an implementation context. The correct approach, focusing on iterative refinement and user feedback, represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of change management and system adoption. By involving end users and stakeholders in pilot testing and phased rollouts, the implementation team can identify and rectify process inefficiencies or misinterpretations before widespread deployment. This iterative methodology ensures that the optimized processes are not only technically sound, but also practical and aligned with the daily realities of the users, thereby fostering adoption and maximizing the return on investment in the Maximo system. This aligns with the implicit expectation of a successful and sustainable implementation, a key objective of any professional project. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, top-down process redefinition without user validation fails to account for the complexities of real-world operations and user workflows. This can lead to processes that are theoretically efficient but practically unworkable, causing frustration, workarounds, and ultimately, a failure to achieve the intended optimization. Such an approach risks creating a system that is technically implemented but operationally ineffective, potentially leading to data inaccuracies and a decline in asset management effectiveness, which is contrary to the goals of implementing a system like Maximo. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on automating existing, potentially inefficient, manual processes without reevaluating their necessity or effectiveness, misses a critical opportunity for true optimization. This automating the mess strategy can entrench existing problems, making them harder to fix later and failing to leverage the full capabilities of Maximo for genuine process improvement. This represents a failure in strategic thinking and a missed opportunity to deliver significant value. A professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a thorough understanding of current workflows, clear definition of optimization goals, stakeholder engagement from the outset, a phased implementation strategy with pilot testing, continuous monitoring and feedback loops, and a commitment to iterative refinement. This structured approach ensures that process optimization in Maximo is driven by business needs, user acceptance, and a clear path to measurable improvements, all while maintaining operational integrity. Question 20. What factors determine the appropriate configuration of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7? 5. To ensure compliance with specific industry regulations within the United States, considering the need for auditable data and operational workflows. Option A. The general capabilities of IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5. For asset tracking and maintenance scheduling, irrespective of specific U.S. regulatory mandates. Option B. The specific mandates of relevant U.S. regulatory bodies, e.g., EPA, OSHA, FDA, NERC, and their impact on asset lifecycle management, data integrity, and reporting requirements. Option C. The preferences of the IT department for system performance optimization without explicit consideration of regulatory requirements. Option D. The availability of third-party add-on modules for Maximo that claim to offer compliance features, without verifying their alignment with specific U.S. regulations. The correct answer is B. The specific mandates of relevant U.S. regulatory bodies, e.g., EPA, OSHA, FDA, NERC, and their impact on asset lifecycle management, data integrity, and reporting requirements. Explanation: Scenario analysis. Implementing IBM Maximo Asset Management v7. 5. Within a regulated industry, such as a utility company or a pharmaceutical manufacturer, presents significant challenges related to regulatory compliance. The core challenge lies in ensuring that the system's configuration, data management, and operational processes align with stringent industry-specific regulations, e.g., FDA regulations for pharmaceuticals, NERC CIP for utilities in the U.S. Failure to do so can result in severe penalties, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. The complexity arises from the need to translate regulatory requirements into actionable system settings and workflows within Maximo, requiring a deep understanding of both the software's capabilities and the regulatory landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive audit of existing regulatory requirements and a thorough mapping of these requirements to specific Maximo V7, 5 functionalities and configuration settings. This includes identifying which regulatory mandates impact asset lifecycle management, maintenance scheduling, calibration, quality control, and data archiving. Best professional practice dictates a proactive stance, where regulatory compliance is integrated into the system design and implementation phases, rather than being an afterthought. This approach ensures that Maximo is configured to automatically enforce compliance, generate necessary audit trails, and facilitate reporting for regulatory bodies. It leverages Maximo's built-in features for audit logging, security controls, and workflow automation to meet these demands, thereby representing a robust and defensible compliance strategy. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the technical implementation of Maximo V7. 5. Without considering the specific regulatory framework of the operating jurisdiction is professionally unacceptable. This would lead to a system that may function technically, but fails to meet legal and industry obligations, resulting in non-compliance. Another incorrect approach is to rely on manual workarounds or external documentation to bridge the gap between Maximo's capabilities and regulatory demands. This is inefficient, prone to human error, and does not provide the auditable, integrated compliance that regulatory bodies expect. It fails to leverage the system's potential for automated compliance enforcement. A third incorrect approach is to assume that generic best practices for asset management are sufficient for regulatory compliance. While beneficial, these practices may not address the specific, often granular, requirements mandated by law or industry standards within the relevant jurisdiction. This oversight can lead to significant compliance gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing regulatory requirements that carry the highest potential for penalties or operational impact. This involves engaging with legal and compliance experts early in the project lifecycle. A structured methodology for requirements gathering, system configuration, testing, and validation, with a specific focus on regulatory adherence, is crucial. Continuous monitoring and periodic audits of the Maximo system's compliance posture are essential to adapt to evolving regulations and ensure ongoing adherence. The decision-making process should always prioritize demonstrable compliance over mere technical functionality.